All right, parents, this is probably the strategy you're more familiar with from school. This is where we find a common denominator, create equivalent fractions, and add from there. Students have been working on drawing pictures and models for equivalent fractions so they understand why we can do this. But this is when we just use straight numbers to figure it out. So step one, we're going to look at both denominators and we're going to list their multiples. What I stress for my kids is starting with the first 5 multiples of each, and then if we don't have one in common, we can go from there. So in this case, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 for our thirds, and we would do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 for our fifths. Now, I have told my students that if they get to the second one and they find one that they share, they can stop. So in this case, 15 is what's called their least common multiple. And the students know then that we are going to translate that least common multiple into a common denominator. So we now know that sometimes my technology doesn't like to work. Hopefully there we go. Okay, so we can translate both of these into an equivalent fraction over 15. Okay, so then what we have to do is we have to make sure that when we change these, that we're creating a fraction that's equal to 1 in between. So students ask themselves, 3 times what got me to 15? Well, that's times 5. And if I do the same thing on the top, I'm actually multiplying by a fraction equal to 1, so that means I'm not changing the value. So 1 times 5 would give me 5. Then I come over to my 2/5 and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask myself, how did I go from 5 to 15? Well, that's times 3. I have to do the same thing on the top. So 2 times 3 is 6. Now, as I said, students are able to add with common denominators. They learned that in 4th grade and we've already reviewed it this year. They know that when they add, the denominator stays the same because they're the same size pieces, and then 5 plus 6 equals 11. And to prove that, you could go back to that model that we showed in the previous video. But this shows that 1/3 plus 2/5 equals 11/15.